Hello, my name is Michael Labbott, and today I want to talk a little bit more about Brexit. I wanted to kind of summarise where we are with it and how it's all going. But before I do that, I just like to say a few words about Dominic Raab, who has resigned today. Apparently, he resigned of his own accord. I don't think Little Rishi could quite pluck up the courage to tell him to resign, but he's resigned with all the dignity and grace of a serial killer who's been accused of killing 24 people and only found guilty of killing 2. And I think he thinks it was all extremely unfair, that the inquiry was unfair. The rules are unfair, and that it is unfair that went against him, and so he's now gone off, and I presume he's looking for other people to bully. But what has happened as a result of him leaving is that Alex Chalk has been drafted in to replace him as Lord Chancellor, and this has slightly changed the composition of the cabinet. The cabinet is 30 members, of whom now 70%, 21, voted for, campaigned for, and believed in Remain, and who all know now, beyond any question, that they were right. But nonetheless, they're plugging on, going on, pressing on, telling us all how Brexit is a good thing and how it's all going to work out wonderfully and so on. And I suppose they're thinking about their big salaries and their ministerial cars and the red boxes, and of course the fact that once they leave the cabinet, they'll go and slot into any all sorts of very well rewarded boardroom positions where they'll do very little except add their names. So we've got a government which doesn't believe in Brexit, or at least 70% of them don't believe in Brexit, but nonetheless they're all pressing on. I think there's a desire right now to put it all behind us, forget Brexit. It's done and dusted, and it's all over. It's a little bit like having a very serious illness which needs curing, but you decide to live with it and just not talk about it and hope it'll go away. And all the time it's getting more and more serious and doing more and more damage. And when you look at Brexit and the situation we're in compared with how things were previously, we know that trade is going down. We see that we're going to be forecast to be the slowest growing economy in the G20 this year. We know that no one's investing in this country. We know we've got terrible shortages of labour. We know there's a great deal of business uncertainty. Uncertainty is something that businesses absolutely hate. We know there's a lot of anxiety amongst the population at large. We know that prices are going through the roof, that people are really struggling. A lot of people are really struggling. And there seems no light at the end of the tunnel, and yet we're told to just move on. Now, as I've explained before, it doesn't matter whether you've got a business or whether you're an individual. If you have a certain income, and as a country we had a certain income before Brexit, and we were making ends meet, we were living reasonably well, and paying our bills and so on. We had a bit of debt and so on, but we were okay. We were doing okay. Now, as a result of Brexit, our income has come down. We have less money. We're getting more and more into debt, and so we have a problem. And when you lose, as a business, for example, you lose a chunk of your turnover, a chunk of your sales, as we did when we left the EU. We lost so much business with the EU. When you lose that, you then have less money. You have less money to pay the bills. And the only way you're ever going to resolve that problem is by getting more business. And this is the whole thing about Brexit. We were told that we were going to get these trade deals all over the world. And it was no problem just sacrificing the business we were doing in the EU, because we're going to make it up everywhere. And when you look at actually what we have made up, it's really ridiculous. It's a joke. The first deals we got were with New Zealand and Australia. The deal with Australia was so bad that there's actually on YouTube there's a clip of a news program where they're laughing about how ridiculously biased the Australia deal is in favour of Australia, and how it's going to seriously damage our farming. Quite apart from the absurd idea that you should replace sources of lamb and beef you should replace local sources with alternative sources 12,000 miles away. The absolute nonsense of it, especially at a time when we're all concerned about global warming and so on. And then there was the much trumpeted deal negotiated by Liz Truss with Japan. You remember she went off to Japan, I think lactose intolerant Japan. She went off sending them cheese or something. But anyway, she much trumpeted this deal, this free trade deal she'd done with Japan. It was going to change the world. It was going to change. Well, we didn't need the EU once we got this deal. Well, in the year since this deal was negotiated, though the year after she completed the negotiation, when she had her photographs all over Twitter, hundreds of photographs of her shaking hands with the Japanese authorities and so on, our trade has actually gone down with Japan. We're doing less trade as a result of that. So that's not really, really helping in making up for the huge amount of trade we've lost with the EU. And then, of course, as I talked about last week, there's a CPTPP where in 10 years' time they thought they got a bit overestimated. They got carried away. They thought we might add 0.08% to our GDP, but now they've had to say that's not likely to be achieved. And where else are we going to get into trade deals? We're not going to trade deal with America. We're not going to trade deal with India. We're not going to try. Who's going to get to a trade deal with us? Indonesia? Guatemala? I mean, there aren't that many places we can do trade deals, and we don't produce the goods or the services that a lot of these poorer countries around the world are likely to want to buy. So we're high and dry. We haven't got enough business. We're not exporting enough. And the government has no idea what to do. Incidentally, 2 years ago, we were the 5th largest exporters in the world in terms of volume of goods and services, 5th largest in the world. We now dropped down in the space of a year to 7th. Imports will remain the same. We're 6th biggest country in the world in terms of imports. So we're still importing. So obviously that's having an effect on our balance of payments. This week, only yesterday, I think it was announced that retail sales had dropped in March by 0.9%. And this doesn't take into account, doesn't take into account inflation, because between last year and this year, inflation has been around 10% or more. And so the actual fall in retail sales is considerably more than 0.9%. But we're told there's nothing to do with the fact that people have to pay more money for their mortgages, for their interest on their loans, for their food, for their petrol, for their gas, for electricity, for eating out, for buying anything. They have to pay more, so they have much, much less money to spend out shopping. It's nothing to do with that. No, not that. It's because during March it rained. It rained. That's what did it. I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but it seems that in the UK, if it rains, everybody stays home. Nobody goes out. But that's it. Apparently, that's the reason that retail sales fell so dramatically in March. And on the subject of rain, you remember the terrific chaos at Calais over Easter, and we were told it was not because every single passenger, those coach loads of passengers, every single passenger had to have their passports individually inspected to see they hadn't spent too much time in the EU and then stamped. That was nothing to do with that. It was the bad weather again. The bad weather. Those 50,000-ton ferries with all the most modern navigation aids and so on that can navigate in the dark or in fog or whatever. They can't go out when the weather is bad in the channel. No. So that was the reason. It's like when we couldn't get tomatoes and cucumbers and so on a few months ago. When you saw pictures all over the internet of supermarkets in every country in Europe, absolutely full, with all the fruit and vegetables you could shake a stick at, and at the same time you went into Sainsbury's or Tesco's and there were all those big green plastic containers they put all the fruit and veg, all empty, rows and rows of empty things. That was nothing to do with Brexit. It wasn't anything to do with the fact that, as far as EU producers are concerned, if there's even a slight shortage, they'll give preference to other people in the EU because they're so much easier to deal with, rather than come to the UK where it's so difficult and complicated. This is even before we introduce import controls. No, it was nothing to do with that. It was the bad weather in Spain. Bad weather in Spain. The weather in Spain, I'm not sure it was too much rain or was too hot or too cold. I can't remember what it was, but it particularly affected all the fruit and vegetables that was going to come to the UK. Everybody else was okay. We've got the highest inflation in the UK, haven't we, at 10%. Now, that's nothing to do with the fact that we're the only country in the EU that's left the EU. Sorry, the only country in Europe that's left the EU. And as I keep saying, these food shortages are really something we should be concerned about, because it's going to get, once we introduce import controls, as we are legally obliged to do, even though, as Jacob Rees-Mogg said himself, it would be an act of self-harm to do so, we do have to do so. It'll be a great inconvenience to the smuggling trade once we do have to introduce import controls, because they've had a free run until now. But when we do, it's gonna have a big effect on food supplies, especially as UK producers are struggling. Then there's the question in passing of immigration following, because that was one of the big reasons we Brexited. Now, I've talked in the past of someone I know who's been here for the last 6 years waiting for the Home Office to give him permission to stay, during which time he's been working throughout. I met somebody else last week, a guy who also came here to go to university. He came 12 years ago, and he studied. He got a first-class degree, and he asked for right to remain. And in the last 9 years, from time to time, the Home Office asked him to come for an interview, and then he goes away again. And I talked to him a little bit about this the other day, and I said, "Do they tell you, you mustn't work?" He said, "Yes, they always insist that we absolutely must not work." And I said, "Did they ever ask how you're living?" No, they don't ask that. And I said to him, "Do you know anybody else in the same situation?" And he looked at me and immediately said, "There are thousands and thousands and thousands of us." He said, "There are so many people working in the black economy, waiting for the Home Office, waiting years and years and years." And again, going back to what I've also said previously, we've got these apparently 160,000 people in these hotels, where the hotels are charging £200 a night for hotels that normally they charge £40 a night for, but the government's paying anyway, and then the government's telling us it's costing us £6 million a day. All these people doing absolutely nothing, year after year, apart from probably going mad, a lot of them. Because we can't let them work. We're desperate for workers in all sorts of industries, but if they worked and they paid taxes, they would actually be a benefit. We would actually profit both from having their labour and also from the taxes they would pay. But no, keep them there. Like this guy I met yesterday, he's not allowed to work. He can use the NHS because he's still waiting for a decision, but he can't work. And so for 9 years he's worked full time. I think he's probably done quite well. He seems to live quite well. Hasn't paid a penny in national insurance or PAYE. And what does this crazy woman, the Home Secretary, say? Got to go after the boat people. Got to send them to Rwanda. That's the most important thing. 160,000 people, and by the sounds of it, there are tens of thousands of others in the black economy. Don't want to go after them. Don't want to sort that out problem out. No. What we've got to do is just get a few of them and send them to Rwanda, and get a few more and put them on a prison ship. It's just insane. And now it seems that she's going to be given the power to override the European Commission of Human Rights if they object to any people being sent to Rwanda. And then we get things like the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, getting up and saying, we're going to create a Silicon Valley. We're going to create 7 new Canary Wharfs. It just shows you how completely and utterly deluded and out of touch his government is. I mean, they are just crazy. There was an item on Newsnight last week where they interviewed a guy. I think he was originally Austrian, but anyway, he's a big in the tech industry, and he formed a company making Acorn computers many years ago. It was very successful and so on. And he was one of the founders of a thing called ARM, which was the jewel in the crown of the British high tech industry. Very, very big, very successful company which makes and designs chips that go in just about every telephone in the world. They're actually listing on the stock exchange now, as I mentioned before, but they're doing so in New York, not in the UK, despite the fact that they're based in the UK, Japanese owned. Anyway, he was asked, he was told, the Chancellor thinks that we're going to create a Silicon Valley here. What do you think the chances of success are? And he just laughed and he just said, chances are zero. He said there are three big centres of high-tech these days, and they are America, China and Europe. And he described the UK as a minnow. He then went on to say, without being prompted, to say that Brexit was the greatest loss of sovereignty for this country since 1066. And so we just slide on down, but everybody's just hoping it'll all go right, hoping things will pick up and everything's suddenly going to get better again. Somehow we'll start getting rich and successful. The NHS, which is clearly being lined up for privatisation, is falling to pieces, and the police and everything. With so many problems with public services, and it's just so absolutely obvious. The only way you solve any of these problems is by expanding your economy, and we are doing the absolute opposite. We've just put up so many barriers and obstacles to trade, and until somebody actually comes to their senses and says, this is mad. This is a sinking ship. We are on a sinking ship. Make no mistake, the ship is sinking, and there's no way of turning it around. And until somebody acknowledges that, until somebody acknowledges the damage that's been done by leaving the EU and then starts focusing on finding ways, we may have to go back absolutely begging for some sort of deal, but which we will eventually, until we turn around and try to get closer to Europe. Sunak, he can't do it now because his whole thing is about how proud he is of Brexit. Starmer wants to renegotiate that. He's making a success of it. I mean, he's making a success of this sinking ship. And until somebody says, no, this is madness, it's a dead end, it's never going to get any better, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and who knows where it's going to lead us and what the consequences are going to be if we don't do something pretty soon. And it's just exasperating. But anyway, that's what I think about it. If you've watched this far, thank you very much indeed, and until next week, bye for now.